This is Bob Neal welcoming you to Chicago. The view of the beautiful skyline from a chilly Lake Michigan and inside the Madhouse on Madison Street. The New York Knicks and the Chicago Bulls. The defending world champion Bulls blew right through Miami. They had a tough time in Game 3, but won 3-0, and the Heat's out of there. The first time the Heat got into the playoffs, and the Bulls have had 5 days to rest. The New York Knicks, on the other hand, had a real old-fashioned Eastern Conference war with the Detroit Pistons and finally won in 5. Now, if that's not tough enough for the Knicks, knowing they had 5 and the Bulls are rested, look at what the Bulls have done to the Knicks. 14 straight wins, 17 straight at home. The Bulls have not lost here to the Knicks since 1987 and 4-0 in the regular season this year. But, Doug, you know that that can be thrown out some because you had some similar experiences yourself when you were coaching the Bulls.
Well, let me give you an experience. In 1989, when I was coaching the Bulls, we beat Cleveland on Michael's sensational last shot. First question is, where's the emotional level team going to be? Went to New York a day later and won in overtime to break through and won that series. Did the same thing at the end of the Knicks series and then beat Detroit in Game 1 in Detroit. This is the steal game. This is the game that New York wants to come in and get right now.
Now, if they do that, we have to talk about matchups. The Cartwright-Ewing matchup is interesting, and a lot of pro basketball fans know that Cartwright plays Ewing pretty tough, and of course he's the heart and soul of the New York team. But there are some other key matchups too.
Well, I think the real matchup is Xavier McDaniel and Scottie Pippen. Xavier McDaniel had a very poor regular season, played great against the Pistons in the playoffs, but look what he did against Chicago. Game 1 right on through, really only one good ball game. He needs to be a factor offensively, but really on the offensive boards. That's really where he hurt the Pistons in the last series. Oakley, speaking of Charles, must do a great job against Horace Grant, use his muscle, as well as Mason inside.
So it's the muscle of the Knicks and the speed and defense of the Chicago Bulls from the Madhouse on Madison Street. We'll be back here along with MJ right after these commercial messages. We'll join Ernie Johnson in our studios in Atlanta.
Ernie Johnson, Kevin Lockery in Atlanta, moments away from the tip at Chicago Stadium. The Bulls have beaten these guys 14 straight times, playoffs included. Does New York have a chance in this series, Coach?
I think it's going to be very difficult, Ernie, for them to beat Chicago unless they shoot a high percentage from the outside, and that's not their strength.
Michael Jordan, averaging 45 points a game, of course, carries the load for the Chicago Bulls. They're ready to take the court at Chicago Stadium. Let's go back to Bob Neal and Doug Collins in Chicago, guys.
Thank you, Ernie. At Chicago Stadium, 18,676. It's standing room only once again. And here are the Jeep Eagles starting lineups.
Well, we see the matchups early. Can McDaniel's strength overcome the speed and quickness of Scottie Pippen? The same thing can be said about Oakley. You know that Cartwright and Ewing are going to be jostling in the post. Mark Jackson, how strong will his leg be after having a little bit of a pull thigh muscle? And Gerald Wilkins definitely has his hands full with Michael Jordan.
Wilkins there, the guy who, of course, wins that matchup. Just kidding. Pat Riley, winningest playoff coach in NBA history, had a tough one against the Detroit Pistons, but proving once again that he's getting winning ways back to New York. And there is Phil Jackson, 28-8 in the playoffs. And the Bulls 3-0 in the first round against Miami in these playoffs. Patrick Ewing, he's the man for New York.
Bob, a couple things I think to watch early. First of all, Patrick Ewing cannot afford to get in foul trouble inside. We know that the Bulls like to go to Bill Cartwright early, probably the first couple series of play. Secondly, as Kevin Lockery said in the studio, New York does not shoot the ball well. The one thing they can do is if they bang the offensive boards and get some second and third shots, it will slow the pace of this game. They cannot turn the ball over. Chicago wants to space the floor. They feel that New York is a very, very good hands-on defensive team, but if you space them, that they will break down individually.
Ed Middleton, Ed T. Rush, Ron Gerritsen are the officials for tonight's ball game, and we're underway from Chicago. Mark Jackson, the point guard, moved back into his leadership role with the Knicks under Riley this year. Into Ewing early. The bounce pass to Wilkins off the double team. It's 2-0 New York.
Well, that's what you're going to see when Patrick Ewing puts it on the floor. Michael Jordan going back to help. That will free Gerald Wilkins at the top or whoever's on the top of the floor for the open jumper.
Horace Grant to Scottie Pippen. Big matchup here. McDaniel and Pippen. Jackson on Paxson. 5 seconds to shoot. Jordan on the fadeaway. Rebound, Patrick Ewing.
That's the type of tempo that New York wants to face. They'd like for Chicago to use a lot of the 24-second shot clock before they get a shot up at the basket.
Knicks 2-0. Ewing in and out of there. Chicago ball. The rebounding strength of the front line of New York is evident. 11.6 per game for Ewing, 11.0 for Oakley, 9 a game for McDaniel. All three are in the top 20 in rebounding in the playoffs. Horace Grant wide open. Rebound McDaniel.
You're not going to see many fast breaks from New York unless it's just there, the opportunities there. They're going to bring the ball down the floor. They're going to use the clock. They'd like to keep their turnovers down, get a good shot every time down the floor, and then maybe a second or third opportunity. There's the double team. Wilkins again, wide open.
And he knocks it down. 2 for 2 from the perimeter. As you pointed out early, New York has to shoot well from the perimeter, and they're doing that at least early. And Phil Jackson gets a very early timeout here, only a minute and a half into the game.
Well, I think what they're going to talk about is the double teams. Michael came all the way across the floor, and I don't know if he's the designated guy right now. You see Phil talking to Michael. In many instances against Ewing, you like to spin him outside, and I know when I was here in Chicago, you bring a guy down from behind him. You bother his shot from behind him. But Ewing was able to easily spot Wilkins twice. Now here comes Michael. You're going to see he's across the floor. Here comes the double team. Now see, Ewing is facing him. So he saw Michael coming the whole way. I don't think Phil wants him to double unless Ewing, his back is turned, because once he saw Michael coming, he saw the double team through right over the top. Wilkins with the easy shot.
21 on the shot clock for the Bulls, trailing 4-0. Opening moments, first quarter from Chicago Stadium. Cartwright gets inside, is hammered by Oakley.
That's going to be 2 shots in the ball. We already see the presence of Charles Oakley inside. So it's a flagrant foul. It's going to be 2 shots in possession. We saw this in the Detroit series. Early in the game, Charles Oakley did the same thing to Rodman. You see it right there. You know, a lot of people feel that the rule says if you're going for the ball, it's okay. Bob, it's any unnecessary foul. Anything considered unnecessary or extra rough where it's flagrant. If it's too rough, it could be flagrant and an ejection. You see Charles Oakley talking to Phil Jackson now on the sideline. You know, a lot of people felt that Oakley would not play the same way against Chicago as he did against Detroit because he used to play for this team and that these guys are his friends. Well, from the looks of that first play, I don't think that's going to be the case.
You got that right. Cartwright misses them both. He only shot 50% in the Miami series.
Bill's free throws have gone way down. He used to be around an 80%, or he is slipping.
Jordan misses. Grant with an offensive rebound. Ewing raked it away, and the Knicks on the run. McDaniel. Now Jordan on the run. Has Pippen. He's fouled and will go to the line.
See, that's what New York has to be very careful about. A transition shot. Xavier McDaniel took the jump shot. It was not a bad shot, but the difference, you've got Michael Jordan rebounding and now throwing out to Pippen on the fast break. This is what Chicago wants to do. So anytime the outside shot is taking, they're going to have one or maybe even 2 guys back to protect against this. You want Scottie Pippen shooting jumpers.
The Bulls' first point of this game comes 2 minutes and 4 seconds in.
I think you're going to see Chicago try to put a little pressure up the floor also. After free throws, see if Horace Grant, Bill Cartwright come up the floor. I think they feel that they can force New York into some turnovers.
I had the Chicago-Miami game 3 down in Miami, and Miami had a 17-point first quarter lead as the Bulls came out perhaps overconfident, then came back and won that ball game.
See, Charles Oakley's going to handle the basketball. You've got Horace Grant at 16, who's exceptionally quick. You see a lot of this with Cleveland also, too. They like to bring Larry Nance or Hot Rod Williams up just to make teams use shot clock.
Mark Jackson with 5 seconds to shoot. 3, 2. Wilkins misses the 3. Ewing steals the offensive board.
Nice pass.
McDaniel.
They're going to call an offensive foul. This is a late call. I don't know who this is against.
Well, Scottie Pippen was pushed almost off the floor and slid right out of there.
Oakley, it's going to be on Charles Oakley. I saw him go number 34. It's like the play was suspended there for a while. Here's the shot. It's missed. You go up right there. Now it looks like